So as an example, I'd like you to think of this little scenario. Suppose UTA is accused of sex discrimination because the overall percentage of female job candidates offered a position in the last 5 years is less than the overall percentage for male candidates. When we investigate which departments within UTA are discriminating against women, we find that within each department, the percentage of female job applicants who are offered a position is identical to the percentage of male applicants who are offered a position. So think about this for a minute. How can this be? Can each department practice non-discrimination while the organization as a whole hires more men than women? Here's a picture of our example that we've been talking about. Take a minute to look at it, and what you can see is that the percentage of jobs offered in Department A to men and women were both 10%, while Department B hired 5% men and 5% women. But if you look at the number of applicants, that's where we can see the policies that result in discrimination based on gender. So non-discriminatory practices at the departmental level can result in hiring differences at the organizational level. If Department A were to offer a position to 10% of its job applicants and Department B were to offer a position to 5% of its job applicants, neither department would be discriminating on the basis of gender. However, at the organizational level, more positions would be going to men than to women because of the higher number of jobs offered by Department A than Department B. Moving on to talking about the foundations of prejudice. Psychological research in the 1920s was designed to prove American and European race theories of the superiority of the white race. In 1925, for example, an influential article was released that supposedly proved that a review of 73 studies had attested to the superiority of the white race. Growing concerns about anti-Semitism and progress in civil rights led to additional research on prejudice itself. A man named Theodor Adorno fled Nazi Germany in the 40s. He posited that prejudice was actually pathological, and that those who could be classified as what he called authoritarian were most likely to be prejudiced. People with authoritarian personalities, Adorno thought, were people who thought in rigid ways, saw the world as black and white, obeyed authority, and strictly adhered to social rules and hierarchies. Another influential thinker who came a little bit after Adorno was Gordon Allport. And what he did was he really started thinking about what he termed categorical thinking. So again, we're talking about prejudice and race relations. And what Allport said is that the human mind must think with the aid of categories. Once formed, categories are the basis for normal prejudgment. We cannot possibly avoid this process. Orderly living depends on it. And what he meant by that was that even though there are a number of other aspects that affect prejudice, such as emotions, social hierarchies, economic pressure, the most important consideration is that prejudice may be an outgrowth of normal human functioning. So I want to take this a little bit further, and I'd like for you to look at this slide, which shows a shape being turned on its side. If I asked you to identify this shape, many of you might say square, and then the shapes in the middle you might call rotated squares or off-center diamonds. The same thing happens when we relate to people. We have a natural tendency to place people into categories. We want to call them, for example, squares or diamonds. But then what happens to those people that fall in the middle? Social labels are just approximations. They lie on a continuum. Can you really think of two categories that don't overlap with each other? For example, day and night. We usually think of day and night as opposites, but can you specifically say when the day ends and the night begins, or vice versa? What about earth and sea? Where does the earth end and the sea take over? Well, it changes based on the tide. How about living and dead? There are certainly debates going on every day about what constitutes life. The implication is that the differences within the groups will tend to be minimized, and differences between the groups will be exaggerated.